what's up, everyone? Today we're going to be taking a look at Noah Lyles' season opener 1977 and some of the other athletes that were competing as well. The big thing that we wanted to take a look at here was really Noah Lyles, and then Joseph Fahnbulleh would be the other main contender, I think, going into the Olympics. Just being able to see how they would be able to compete, what level they were going to be on as a season opener. Looked really strong, and that was also into a 1.6 mile an hour wind. With the original gun here, it was a little bit quick, right? And for people that know about last week and the whole race with Oblique Seville, we saw that Noah Lyles ended up losing that, and you could tell he was a little bit more prepared for the quick gun this time and was able to respond accordingly. Also, the blocks were a big thing going into all the races, really, or all the men's races at least, where they had to start to make those adjustments. I think he looks really good coming out. I still think Fahnbulleh can do some stuff to work on his start. So we can see the difference here in that Fahnbulleh is coming way more upright. He's way off to the side with his arm, much more upright from the beginning. He does a good job with his landing, but he's really spending way too long on the ground here. We can see how fast Noah Lyles gets that foot down, gets transitioned right back off the ground, how quick he's getting transitioned off the ground, where you can see how Fahnbulleh is still stuck. He's also still in the air with that other foot, where Noah Lyles is already down with that other foot. So we could see that he still has some room to improve within his start, and you can see a lot of extra movement going on within his head there. I think until he cleans up his start, he's going to really end up having a hard time being able to stick with Noah Lyles here, because you could already see how much distance he was able to create for himself in just that first probably 30, 40 meters into the race. Now looking more at Noah Lyles, he did a great job. I would say he didn't look super good with his turn here. I think he almost accelerated a little bit more than he initially maybe wanted to. I think that he was really looking to make up a lot of ground here to start off, and didn't run the cleanest turn as he went around, but wouldn't have a big impact on the end result. He was able to recover quickly like a pro, like we would expect he would, but then that finish just made the finish there's that much cleaner, right? He was able to really open up the stride, look really good. You see Fahnbulleh's coming in and has a good, strong finish as well. As always, I think it's just too little too late, right? When you're this far away coming into the curve, then you're just not going to be able to catch the multiple-time world champion here in the 200 or just in any of these types of long runs. So you got to be able to stay a little bit closer to him. He did look really, really good. Noah Lyles looked really, really strong here as he came out. Looked really relaxed. Didn't look like he was really trying to push at all here. It looked like he was just really trying to have excellent form, that's exactly what he does have here, is excellent form. Great extension within the leg, great foot contact, positioning in comparison to the rest of his body. Does a good job of being able to create a ton of opening within the leg here. And just to get a little bit of some understanding from a technical perspective, some things that I think really stand out when you watch Noah Lyles run that could potentially help you in improving your own speed. Hopefully the start was something that you can take something away from as well that we already talked about. But when we look at how he cycles the leg, I think it's a really, really textbook in a lot of ways, in that he does such a good job with that extension of the leg, right? So he's getting into this position where he's getting that extension and then pulling back, so he's landing with that foot or the leg really straight, and then the foot as close to right underneath him as possible. Now, in order to achieve this, I think there's two different ways that we could be conceptualizing this. One way would be to really think about driving your hips forward, and then the other one would be to be able to really focus on pulling back within the foot. And then, on top of that, it would be really thinking about more of the foot. The other thing could also be trying to almost extend the leg, could also help in being able to make it so now we can get our leg all the way over and up. So if you're landing with your knees too bent, maybe think about extending. If you're having a hard time with landing position with the foot comparison to the hip, then something that could be effective could be either pulling with the leg or really driving those hips forward. And I think lately the idea of driving the hips forward has led to a lot of improvement within people's running. And then from that position, we want to be very quick in being able to get the heel back up. This is a common thing that I see, is that people get stuck with their foot or with their weight too far back in their foot, and therefore will have a hard time being able to transition right back off the ground. So as soon as this foot hits the ground, you want to be aware of getting that heel up. And obviously the time to work on this isn't in the middle of a track meet. The time to work on this is when you're at practice running 10-meter flies or 20-meter flies, and really being aware of how your foot's striking the ground. And then when you get into a high performance situation, now you can apply this technique to be able to run faster. So immediately we want to be able to shift that weight forward, get that heel up, so then we could transition off the ground and do that with as much of our weight as far forward as possible, right? So some people will end up having their weight so far back and trying to get their foot off the ground quickly that now they end up pushing from like further back in the foot, like more underneath like the ball of the foot, or maybe even at the bottom of the toes, where really we want to get all the way into full extension, so you're pushing off with that heel straight up, or really at the very tip of the toe, to make it so then the transition is such a good ability of getting the leg to come right up and through. We don't want to be wasting that time of the foot coming back. We want to be able to, as soon as that foot comes off the ground, bend the knee and drive the heel towards the hip. And so I see a lot of guys that get left with their foot back behind, and then that makes it so then their hips behind, that makes it so then they land further back on the foot, they might start landing with their knee more bent. And so you want to be able to have an understanding of how to be able to transition off the ground to make it so then we could be very quick with that leg swing, so then you can get into a position where when you get into maximum hip flexion, or when that knee is all the way up to hip height, you're able to get that foot right underneath the knee as quickly as possible. Once you can get into this type of position, it really helps you out in being able to set up everything from there. If you can't, or if you have a hard time getting your foot into this 90-degree angle, then it becomes a lot more difficult to be able to maintain running at a very high speed, because what happens is now we end up having our leg starts to drop down a little bit more, our toes start to drop down a little bit more, and now we end up not being able to get as much force into the ground. So the more we can get our knee through and our foot up and our toe up, now we're going to be able to get into a position where we can better control foot strike and be able to do that with the most amount of force as possible. So it's a combination of speed and force is the main thing when it comes to running fast. And in order for you to have both the speed and the force, you have to be able to get the timing down, and the timing has a lot to do with how are we cycling the leg, how are we controlling foot strike. And then on top of that, I would say another important part of this is going to be when you are generating the force and when you are trying to get that speed down, still being able to maintain the length. Especially for younger athletes, it's not always about trying to be really, really quick with the leg cycle. It's also about being able to maximize the stride length. And a lot of the stride length, in my opinion, has to do with the power production, the force production into the ground. So, it still goes under that umbrella, but I think it's important to be aware of how much distance am I covering per step. Typically, I tell people you want to be around 4.5 steps per 10 meters. About 4.5 steps for 10 meters is good for a lot of athletes, depending on the height. I mean, you could maybe have to get it to 5 if you're really a shorter athlete, but I think 4.5 is a good representation of how much force you're generating into the ground. If you're somebody that's like 6'1", 6'2", you definitely don't want to be taking 5 steps in a 10-meter period. You want to be able to limit that down to make it so, again, you're utilizing the force to make it so you can generate the right amount of distance per step, and getting a better understanding of how to land with your legs all the way straight. Again, that goes back into the mechanics and really understanding what you could be doing more effectively in order to improve your speed. So as always, guys, thanks for watching. If you liked it, click that thumbs up down below, subscribe to the channel. We'll link you guys to a couple other videos here. One will have to do with the leg cycle, give you a little bit more understanding about the leg cycle. Another one with Noah Lyles and what he's doing within his sprinting mechanics.